Why did Lucifer seek the body of Moses? The question rose within my spirit like a flame in the dark, burning through the silence of centuries. In the stillness between heaven and earth, I saw a mountain wrapped in the last light of day, and upon that height, a secret older than time itself waited to be spoken. I beheld the moment when heaven and hell held their breath, when creation paused for one heartbeat of eternity, for the dust of one man had become the center of a cosmic dispute. Lucifer, once radiant with divine fire, descended from his throne of shadows not to conquer nations, not to deceive kings, but to claim a corpse. His fall was complete, yet his desire remained the hunger to possess what belonged to God. I saw his form crossing the valleys of Moab, not with the fury of flame, but with the calm arrogance of one who believed all flesh belonged to him. The air bent beneath his steps, and even the stones seemed to tremble. For in his eyes still burned a counterfeit light. The echo of glory he had once borne before pride corrupted it. He came to defile what heaven had sanctified. But why the body of Moses? Why the prophet's dust and not another's? The Spirit answered me, not in thunder, but in stillness, saying, because Moses was not finished. For though his breath had ceased, the current of his covenant still flowed, unseen, unbroken. His death was not an ending, but a transition, a passage guarded by the very hand of God. The scriptures whisper this mystery in one verse that most overlook, Jude 1-9, asterisk, yet Michael the archangel, when contending with the devil, disputed about the body of Moses, did not bring against him a railing accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke thee. Asterisk within that single line lies a revelation of divine authority. This was not a battle of swords, nor of strength, but of ownership. For in that moment the universe watched a question unfold: who has claim over the soul once chosen by God? I saw Mount Nebo as it was, the wind whispering around the stones, the horizon open before Moses like a sea of light. He stood at the edge of promise, seeing what he would never touch. His eyes, though dimmed by years, burned with vision. His spirit was ready, not weary. He did not die as men die. He was called home. I felt the presence of the eternal draw near to him, gentle as dawn, strong as judgment. There were no mourners, no priests, no tomb of honor, only the voice that had spoken from the burning bush, saying again, my servant. And when that voice ceased, the earth received its prophet. But not as men bury the dead, for the Almighty himself stooped down, and with hands unseen laid Moses in the dust of Moab. No man knows the place, for no man was meant to. Heaven veiled the grave, because the memory of the righteous is too easily turned into idols. God buried Moses not to hide him from men, but to preserve him for himself. Yet the act did not go unnoticed. In the lower realms, where rebellion still burns cold, Lucifer perceived what heaven concealed. His pride, ancient and venomous, stirred again. He saw in Moses not decay but destiny. He thought, if I can claim the body, I can corrupt the covenant. I can twist the memory of the prophet into a monument of pride. I can turn reverence into idolatry. For the adversary has always sought to mimic the holy, to possess what reflects divine order. I felt the tension of that moment, the heavens silent, the earth unmoving, the grave sealed by the breath of God. And then the shadow approached. The air thickened with his presence. He spoke not aloud, but within the realm of spirit, claiming, he failed, he disobeyed, he struck the rock, the wages of sin are mine. His logic was cold, his accusation precise, yet his understanding was hollow, for he could not grasp mercy. He could not comprehend that Moses, though disciplined, was not rejected. He belonged still to the Lord who chose him. In that instant, light split the valley. Michael descended not as a warrior bearing weapons, but as authority incarnate. His brilliance made the darkness retreat. His countenance bore no anger, only certainty. I heard his words as thunder clothed in calm. The Lord rebuke you. It was not a negotiation. It was a decree. And all the rebellion of hell shrank before it. In that clash of silence and command, the mystery unfolded before my sight, the body of Moses, though lifeless, was a vessel of divine intention. It carried within it the imprint of the covenant, the echo of glory, and the shadow of prophecy yet to be fulfilled. For Moses would not remain forgotten. He would appear again beside Elijah, speaking with the Christ of the ages on another mountain under another light. That which Lucifer sought to defile was destined to stand in the presence of the Redeemer. And so it was sealed. I saw the valley close again, quiet as before, the wind whispering through unseen reeds. Heaven had defended what hell desired, and the message burned into my heart. Asterisk, when God lays claim to something, not even death can take it. Asterisk. In that revelation, I understood the story of Moses' body is not about burial. It is about belonging. It is a mirror of every soul that has ever stood between light and shadow. Lucifer still whispers the same accusations today, but the same voice that spoke through Michael still answers, "The Lord rebuke you." And that word, spoken once over the body of a prophet, still guards the living who walk in covenant. For what God has sealed, no darkness can unbind. The mountain was silent beneath the breath of eternity, and I saw Moses standing upon its height, wrapped in the last fire of the Sunday. The air shimmered as though creation itself waited for his final word. His eyes, still sharp with vision, gazed upon the land that stretched beyond the Jordan, a land promised yet withheld. He was not dying of weariness, nor surrendering to the decay of age. His spirit remained whole, and his strength unbroken. The scripture declares, his eye was not dim, nor his natural force abated. It was not death that took him. It was summons. I felt the pulse of the divine call moving through the wind, gentle yet absolute, saying, "Moses, my servant, it is time." He had lived 3 lives in one body, each forged by fire. 40 years in Pharaoh's courts, clothed in the wisdom of men but burdened by the cry of the enslaved. 40 years in the wilderness, stripped of titles and crowns, finding in the silence of desert rock the whisper of a God who speaks through exile. And 40 years more, leading a stubborn nation through flame and famine, rebellion and miracle, until his name became a song of endurance written across the ages. Each season had carved him, refined him, and prepared him for this summit. He was more than a man. He was a pattern, a vessel of law and mercy bound together. I saw his memories unfolding like pages in the wind, the cries at the Red Sea, the manna in the morning, the trembling at Sinai when the mountain burned with divine fire. He had stood before God face to face, yet now he stood alone, awaiting the final breath. There was no fear upon him, only peace. He looked upon Canaan, the land flowing with promise, and I sensed no bitterness within him, for he knew that his journey had never been about arrival, but obedience. The promise was not denied, it was fulfilled in another way, for his task had always been to lead, not to enter, to bring the people to the threshold, and then return to the source from which he came. I felt his spirit rise above regret, his soul glowing like an ember ready to return to the flame. The mountain glowed with the quiet majesty of divine presence. I perceived the unseen as the veil thinned the Holy One, drawing near to his prophet. No angel sang, no fire descended. There was only a sacred stillness, and in that stillness I heard a sound beyond sound, like the breath of eternity, bending close. The ground did not quake, the sky did not tear. Yet creation knew that a covenant was being sealed. For when Moses exhaled his final breath, it was not into emptiness, it was into the waiting hands of God. I beheld a light that men cannot see, the radiance that greets the righteous when their work is done. The Almighty himself received him. No mortal eyes beheld it, but I saw in spirit what was written in silence. The Eternal bent down, and with tenderness that no language can contain, he carried his servant into the valley. The ground opened as though it recognized its Creator's touch. The Lord buried him not as men bury the dead, but as one hides a treasure too sacred for the gaze of time. There was no monument, no shrine, no pillar of stone to mark his rest, only the memory of obedience and the echo of glory left upon the mountain wind. And then silence. Heaven sealed what it had claimed. The dust covered what was divine. But even then I felt that the story was not finished, for there was movement in the unseen realms. The burial of Moses was not an end, but a veil. Behind that veil stirred forces older than man. The Lord had hidden his prophet not merely to protect him from idolatry, but to preserve a mystery that stretched beyond the borders of death. For when God buries, he does not lose, he preserves. And what he preserves will one day rise. I saw the valley of Moab cloaked in shadows, yet within the shadows pulsed a light faint but living, as though the soil itself remembered the touch of divine hands. And somewhere beyond that sacred silence, I sensed a watcher, the fallen one, whose pride had never slept. For even as heaven sealed the grave, hell observed. The adversary had seen the light descend upon Nebo, and envy stirred within his ancient heart. He had watched the Creator stoop, and it filled him with a rage older than Eden. He knew that something precious had been hidden from his reach, and though the grave was sealed, his desire was not. Thus the stage was set for the clash of claims, the holy burial that would summon rebellion once more. But for that moment, there was only stillness. The mountain slept beneath the stars, and the spirit of Moses rested in the keeping of the eternal. The earth was quiet, yet heaven watched. For in that valley of Moab, beneath the dust of the prophet, a secret had been planted, a seed of prophecy waiting for its appointed hour. No man saw the burial, yet heaven and hell both knew it had happened. The dust had closed over the prophet, but the act was not forgotten. The earth held its silence, while the unseen realms stirred. I beheld the valley in vision veiled in twilight, where the Almighty himself had stooped to hide what was sacred. The scripture had spoken plainly, asterisk. He buried him in a valley in the land of Moab, but no man knows his burial place to this day. Asterisk, that verse, so brief that many pass it without thought, hides a revelation vast as creation itself. Why would God, who spoke light into being, descend to bury his servant with his own hands? The answer is not found in the dust, but in the nature of the divine. For when God conceals, he is not withholding, he is protecting. Moses was not buried in secrecy out of shame, he was hidden in holiness. The grave became a seal, a covenant between heaven and earth, that no power of darkness might lay claim upon what God had sanctified. I saw how men through the ages build monuments to what they admire and turn memory into worship. Israel had worshipped golden calves, bronze serpents, and idols made from the spoils of their journey. Had they known where Moses lay, they would have built a shrine, they would have crowned his resting place with gold and incense, and the lawgiver would have become an idol. The Lord foresaw it. His wisdom wrapped the body in secrecy so that faith would remain pure. Yet even that was not the deepest reason. I felt in the current of spirit that there was a mystery older than Israel, stretching into the pattern of redemption itself. For the death of Moses was not final. It was the beginning of another revelation, one that would echo into the Mount of Transfiguration centuries later. The Lord buried Moses not to end his story, but to preserve the vessel for a greater appearance yet to come. The veil of death was a waiting room, not a prison. Heaven sealed the grave as one might seal a sacred scroll, to be opened only in the appointed time. But where heaven hides, hell watches. In the shadows beyond the valley, another presence stirred. The adversary had seen the light descend upon Nebo, and he understood that something divine had entered the dust. His mind, ancient and cunning, measured the moment. To him, possession is power, and ownership is dominion. He thought, if I can claim the body, I can claim the symbol. If I can touch what God buried, I can stain what God sanctified. The thought of corruption became his hunger. He, who once bore light before the throne, now sought to defile what reflected it. I saw the motion of his coming, silent as smoke, purposeful as poison. There were no wings, no roar of flame, only a distortion in the air, a bending of creation's harmony. Even the stones shuddered beneath him. The valley of Moab, once serene, darkened as if the sun had retreated from its duty. The adversary stood at the edge of the hidden grave. He had not stumbled upon it. He had times known asterisk. For though heaven veiled it from men, spiritual knowledge is not easily concealed from spiritual beings. The fallen one had watched from afar as God himself descended, and the envy that burned within him now led him here. He desired to undo what the Creator had done. The silence of the valley became tense, filled with the weight of his intention. He stretched forth his will, not his hand, for this was not a theft of matter, but of meaning. If he could claim the body of Moses, he could twist the faith of a nation. He could corrupt the image of obedience, turning reverence into rebellion. He could display the corpse before Israel, proclaiming, "This is your God, the one who failed, the one whom even heaven abandoned." The deception would have been complete. For the hearts of men, hungry for symbols, are easily seduced by sight. The adversary sought not merely to defile the dead, but to enslave the living through what their eyes adored. I saw how the unseen trembled. Angels watched, but did not interfere, for the contest was not yet permitted. The light of heaven did not break forth until the appointed word was spoken, for in the order of divine authority, even war obeys timing. The adversary's presence in that valley was not rebellion alone. It was prophecy unfolding. He believed he acted in cunning, yet he was being drawn into a confrontation decreed before the foundation of the world. For this was the pattern repeated across ages. The light hides, the darkness seeks, and then the voice of God asserts dominion. As he stood before the sealed earth, the valley felt like the pause before a storm. The soil still bore the warmth of divine touch, yet now it trembled beneath the chill of defiance. The fallen light-bearer had come for what was not his, believing that power could be stolen. But what God buries, no hand may unearth without his consent. I sensed the air begin to tighten, the unseen pressing close. The adversary's will clashed against the invisible barrier of divine decree. It was as though heaven itself held its breath, waiting for the word that would shatter the silence. The grave of Moses was not merely a resting place, it was a battlefield of ownership, a question written in the dust. Who claims what God has sanctified? And in that suspended moment between rebellion and rebuke, creation itself awaited an answer. For light and shadow had both gathered over one man's body, and the weight of eternity hovered between them. The valley of Moab grew dark, though the sun had not yet vanished. The air thickened as though it remembered an ancient wound. Silence fell upon the stones, but it was not peace. It was the silence before judgment. A tremor passed through creation as a presence older than human memory drew near. He came not with fire, for his fire had long been extinguished. He came not with music, for his harmony had turned to discord. Lucifer, the fallen bearer of light, entered the place where the Almighty had hidden his servant. His countenance still bore the echo of former glory, but that glory was fractured, twisted into a cold brilliance that no longer warmed, only burned. The light that once led choirs of angels now shimmered like frost upon a grave. His steps were deliberate, each movement heavy with purpose. The ground seemed to recoil beneath his tread, and the air bent around him as though creation itself resisted his intrusion. The Prince of Rebellion stood at the threshold of the forbidden. He did not wander. He came as one who knew precisely what he sought. Before him lay the hidden resting place of Moses, concealed by the hand of God, sealed beneath the quiet dust of Moab. Lucifer beheld the place, and a bitter smile curved upon his face. For he had watched the eternal stoop from his throne to bury a man, and that sight had ignited in him a jealousy more ancient than time. To him the act was an insult. The Creator, whom he had once served, had descended to honor clay. The infinite had bent over the finite, and the fallen one could not bear it. His pride, eternal and venomous, whispered, "This should not be." He had ruled in glory once, commanding legions of fire, crowned with music and light. Yet now he saw God himself attend to the dust of one man, and it pierced him with the memory of what he had lost: the nearness, the favor, the love that no rebellion could reclaim. So he came not merely to claim a body, but to challenge a truth, that the eternal still chooses the humble over the proud. The air grew colder as he extended his will toward the earth. He did not need to speak aloud. His thoughts moved like smoke through the unseen. He failed, he reasoned. He struck the rock in anger. He disobeyed the word. He belongs to death, and death is mine. The argument was flawless in the logic of rebellion, for Lucifer's power has always been in accusation. He does not create, he corrupts. He does not claim by right, he claims by deceit. The valley trembled under the weight of his intent. The silence broke into a low murmur, as if the stones themselves protested. Then the air split with light, not sunlight, but something purer, sharper, eternal. A radiance descended like a sword drawn from the heart of heaven. It cut through the valley, dividing shadow from substance, pride from truth. The adversary turned, and before him stood Michael, the Archangel, Prince of the heavenly hosts. His form burned with holy fire, not consuming but cleansing. His face was like the dawn breaking over endless waters, and his voice carried the resonance of divine order. Between them hung the still body of Moses, unseen yet felt, as though the earth itself guarded the secret of his rest. Lucifer's expression hardened. His beauty, once the reflection of heaven's splendor, now shone with the cold brilliance of defiance. "You have come too late," he said, his voice both music and malice. "He is mine. He sinned. He struck the rock. He defied the command. His flesh belongs to corruption, and corruption belongs to me." The words carried the venom of accusation that has echoed since Eden. Yet Michael did not flinch. He spoke no argument, for in heaven's order truth does not contend with deceit, it commands it. The archangel's eyes blazed not with wrath, but with certainty. He lifted his hand, and with a voice that shook the firmament, he declared, "The Lord rebuke you." The words were not his own. They were the echo of divine authority, the decree of one who alone has the right to claim or release. The moment the words were spoken, the air shuddered. Power invisible yet absolute flooded the valley. The light of heaven pressed down like a wave upon the darkness, and Lucifer staggered beneath its weight. He did not retreat because he feared Michael's might, but because he recognized the source behind it. Authority, not strength, had won. For the power of heaven does not dwell in volume, nor in violence, but in alignment with the will of God. Lucifer's fury erupted. The brilliance of his form flared into a crimson gleam, the remnant of divine fire twisted by rage. "This is not over," he hissed, his voice trembling with the memory of lost dominion. "What God buries, I will one day unearth. What he seals, I will seek to corrupt." But even as he spoke, his words faltered. The decree of heaven silenced him. The light burned hotter, and his shadow fractured like mist before the morning. The valley echoed with a sound like wind moving through eternity. And then he was gone. No ash, no flame, no mark remained, only the echo of defiance swallowed by silence. Michael stood alone upon the mountain's breast, his armor gleaming with the residue of glory. He did not smile, for victory was not triumph, but obedience fulfilled. His gaze turned toward the grave, and the air around him softened. There was reverence in the way he stood, as one who guards not dust but destiny. For in that sealed earth lay more than the remains of a prophet. It held covenant, glory, and prophecy preserved by divine decree. Michael's presence was not the end of the battle, but the affirmation that heaven's claim cannot be challenged. The wind rose gently again, and the valley breathed. The silence that followed was not fear but sanctity. Light lingered upon the rocks like memory, and the scent of divine fire clung to the air. Moses belonged to God in life, in death, and beyond death. The fallen could not claim what was already sealed. The light of heaven withdrew, leaving only the whisper of truth behind. When the Lord rebukes, the universe obeys. The mountain grew still once more. The stars began to rise, and in that vast stillness, the eternal pattern revealed itself again, the pride that seeks to own, the obedience that stands firm, and the authority that speaks once and ends all debate. Lucifer did not fight for every prophet, nor did he contend for the bones of kings or the tombs of priests. He came for Moses because within that body burned something eternal, something that hell could neither imitate nor destroy. Moses was dangerous even in death. His very dust carried traces of divine contact. His life had been an intersection between heaven and earth, law and spirit, justice and mercy. To the fallen, such a relic was intolerable. For if Lucifer could corrupt it, he could twist the meaning of God's covenant, turn reverence into idolatry, and stain the story that pointed toward redemption. The body of Moses was not a symbol of failure, but of authority, a reminder that God's word could shape nations, command nature, and outlast mortality. The adversary knew that if he could distort that symbol, he could confuse generations. He could transform the law from a guide into a chain, from revelation into religion, from covenant into control. That was his oldest desire, to counterfeit holiness, to enslave those who sought God by giving them shadows instead of light. Moses represented covenant. He was the keeper of the tablets, carved not by human hand, but by the breath of the Almighty. Through him the divine order was written into human understanding. The 10 Commandments were not cold rules. They were the boundaries between chaos and creation, the map of divine alignment that held the universe in moral harmony. Lucifer hated those boundaries. He sought to twist them into bondage. If he could corrupt Moses, he could corrupt the very idea of obedience, making it appear as tyranny rather than freedom. For obedience, in its purest form, is not submission to control, but alignment with love. Yet rebellion never sees that truth. To the fallen, law is chains. To the redeemed, law is light. But Moses was not only covenant, he was glory. His face had once shone with the radiance of God's presence so fiercely that men could not bear to look upon him. That light had marked him forever. Even his flesh had absorbed the residue of divine fire. To the one who had once been the light-bearer, that sight was unbearable. Lucifer, the morning star now lost, longed to desecrate what reminded him of what he had forfeited. He wanted to mock the glory he could never regain, to drag holiness into decay, to prove that divine light, once joined with flesh, could be corrupted. But glory that comes from God cannot be destroyed. It only hides, waiting to be revealed again. The third truth was prophecy. For Moses, though dead, was not finished. His body carried a future role in the unfolding plan of redemption. Centuries later, he would stand beside Elijah upon another mountain, speaking with the incarnate Christ about the mystery of death and resurrection. Lucifer knew enough of divine order to fear what he could not stop. He had seen the patterns, the cycles, the symbols. He understood that the story of Moses was woven into a greater tapestry, the revelation of the Son who would conquer death itself. If he could taint Moses' body, he could attempt to corrupt that thread of prophecy. He could not stop the Messiah, but he could try to distort the message, to turn revelation into confusion. Thus, his pursuit was not of flesh, but of meaning. He sought to destroy not the man, but the message written upon him. Michael knew this, and that was why he spoke not of law, nor glory, nor prophecy. He simply invoked the authority of the Lord. For the defense of Moses was not about argument, but about ownership. What is sealed by divine decree cannot be debated by rebellion. The grave became a testament to that truth. Heaven's warrior stood, the valley silent, and the darkness withdrew, for accusation cannot stand where authority has spoken. The battle was never about a corpse. It was about covenant, glory, and prophecy, the triad that forms the foundation of divine revelation. The covenant declares that God is faithful. The glory reveals that his presence transforms. The prophecy confirms that his will shall prevail. These three, embodied in the life and death of Moses, made him a threat to the kingdom of darkness. That is why Lucifer came. That is why Michael stood. That is why the Lord himself buried his servant, not to hide him from men, but to preserve him for destiny. For even in death, Moses belonged to the living God, and what belongs to him cannot be stolen, defiled, or destroyed. The valley bore witness, the heavens recorded. The silence after the battle was not emptiness, but proclamation. The covenant had been guarded, the glory remained untarnished, the prophecy was intact. And from that day forth, the grave of Moses became not a place of mourning, but a monument of divine victory hidden in the dust, whispering through time. When God has laid claim, even death must bow. Michael is not a name to be spoken lightly. It is not a title of peace, but of divine confrontation. He stands where no other dares to stand. When rebellion rises beyond the reach of ordinary strength, heaven sends him. His presence marks the threshold between order and chaos, between what is claimed by God and what seeks to devour it. In the hierarchy of the unseen, Michael is not the highest, yet he is the purest reflection of divine authority in action. His essence is obedience without question, and that obedience becomes power unbreakable. For while other angels speak of love, or wisdom, or creation, Michael speaks of alignment, the unyielding execution of the will of the Almighty. In the days of Daniel, when a messenger of light was hindered by the prince of Persia, it was Michael who came, not with negotiation, but with decree. The prophet wrote, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. For 21 days the demonic resisted, until Michael appeared, and the resistance ceased. It is his nature to enter where darkness pretends to reign. He is not a bearer of mercy, nor of judgment. He is the embodiment of enforcement. When the word is spoken, he ensures it is carried out. That is why he was sent to the valley of Moab, for no other could confront the fallen without corruption. In the revelation of John, when war broke out in heaven, it was not God himself who descended to battle the dragon. It was Michael. And there was war in heaven, the scripture declares. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. This was no metaphor. It was the eternal reflection of spiritual order. For where Lucifer embodies rebellion, Michael embodies submission, and in that submission lies unstoppable might. The war is not of swords, but of truth. Lucifer's power lies in deception, Michael's in obedience. The fallen commands by lies, the faithful conquers by alignment. When Michael stood before Lucifer over the body of Moses, he did not argue, because argument feeds rebellion. He did not reason, because reasoning dignifies pride. He simply declared, "The Lord rebuke you." That single phrase contains the entire hierarchy of creation. For Michael does not speak his own authority, he channels the decree of the eternal. He has no opinion, no self, no pride. He is pure execution of divine will, and that is why he cannot be defeated. Lucifer cannot comprehend such strength. He believes power is found in possession, in dominance, in self-will. Yet the greatest strength lies in yielding completely to God. Obedience to heaven is the highest form of freedom. That is the mystery of Michael. His silence is thunder. His stillness is movement. His submission is command. In him we see the reversal of Lucifer's fall. For Lucifer said, "I will ascend, I will exalt, I will be like the Most High." Michael, whose name means times who is like God, asterisk, speaks the eternal contradiction. None is like God. His very name is a rebuke to pride, a living word that annihilates rebellion without weapon or argument. When he faced Lucifer in the valley, he did not need to remind the fallen one of his past. His presence was reminder enough. The glory that shone from Michael was the reflection of what Lucifer had lost, the light of unbroken communion. The fallen prince still bore fragments of beauty, but it was beauty detached from order, a mirror shattered by self-love. Michael stood as the unbroken mirror, reflecting only what was above him. That is why darkness recoils from his light. For hell cannot bear the sight of uncorrupted obedience. The valley of Moab became a theater of eternal contrast. Pride and humility, rebellion and submission, deception and decree. The two stood facing one another, not as rivals of equal strength, but as embodiments of two spiritual laws. One law says, "I will." The other says, "Thy will be done." The universe bends toward the latter, for creation itself was built on divine alignment. When Michael declared, "The Lord rebuke you," that alignment rippled through all realms. The authority behind those words did not come from the archangel's rank, but from his surrender. He had emptied himself of all but obedience, and thus he became unstoppable. Lucifer's fall was complete in that moment, not because he fled, but because he was reminded of his impotence. His rebellion had reached its boundary, and the boundary spoke. "The Lord rebuke you." 3 words, no sword, no flame, no strike, only the word. And in that word lies all power. The mountains quivered. The unseen trembled. The body of Moses remained untouched, sealed by decree, guarded not by force, but by divine claim. Michael turned not in triumph, but in fulfillment. His mission was never conquest, it was confirmation. To defend what God has spoken is not victory, it is faithfulness. That is the essence of Michael's being. From Eden to Nebo to the end of days, he remains the sentinel of divine authority, the enforcer of spiritual law. And even now, though men cannot see him, his presence moves where obedience is required. When nations tremble, when spirits contend, when the faithful stand between accusation and grace, Michael moves unseen, for his war did not end in that valley. It continues wherever rebellion seeks to rise. The same authority he spoke then still echoes through creation. The Lord rebuke you. Those words are not confined to Scripture. They live, they guard, they protect. They are the invisible wall around what God has claimed. Thus, the Battle of Nebo was not an isolated moment, but a pattern revealed the eternal tension between the will of man and the will of God, between pride that ascends and obedience that kneels. And in the end, obedience always stands taller, for in kneeling before the eternal, Michael became the instrument through which heaven rules. This is the secret power of the servant, the unseen strength of surrender, the flame that never falters because it burns from the breath of God. The battle over Moses' body was not only a celestial event, it was a mirror held before the souls of men. What happened in that valley was a revelation of how heaven still moves on behalf of those God calls his own. The story is not about angels and dust, it is about belonging. It is about divine ownership that cannot be revoked by failure, death, or accusation. When the Lord buried Moses, he did more than conceal a grave. He demonstrated his pattern of protection, the unseen defense of those chosen for purpose. For Moses did not witness the struggle, he was gone. His breath had ceased, his heart had stilled, yet heaven still fought for him. That is the nature of grace. It defends even when we are unaware. It shields even when we are silent. Lucifer's claim was legal, for he always speaks in the language of accusation. He failed, the adversary said. He disobeyed. He struck the rock. Those words are not new. They are the same accusations whispered into the minds of the living. The enemy points to failure as proof of ownership. He believes sin seals possession, but he does not understand mercy. He cannot comprehend redemption. He sees the fall, but not the hand that lifts. For when God chooses, he does not revoke. When he seals, no power can unseal. Michael's single declaration, "The Lord rebuke you," became more than a command to darkness. It became the pattern of divine defense for all generations. That phrase echoes still, unseen yet active, guarding every soul that belongs to God. It is not merely an event of the past, but a principle of eternity. What heaven has claimed, hell cannot keep. Many imagine that spiritual battles are fought only in visible chaos, in storms, in nations, in wars. But the truest warfare happens in the silence of the unseen, where accusation meets authority. The conflict over Moses' body revealed the same struggle that surrounds every believer's life. The enemy accuses, God defends. The Lord does not defend by argument, but by decree. The Lord rebuke you. That sentence holds the essence of spiritual safety. It means, this one is mine, depart. For in heaven's order, possession is not decided by merit, but by mercy. Moses' body mattered because it carried covenant. Your life matters because you carry the same covenant that guarded Moses guards all who walk in faith. It is written that the blood of Christ speaks better things than that of Abel. That blood declares ownership that no failure can annul. Moses' burial was a sign that what is consecrated to God remains under his claim, even when unseen, even when silent, even when buried. The battle for the prophet's body is a portrait of divine faithfulness. When God claims something, he keeps it. When he sanctifies it, he guards it. That truth extends beyond the grave. The enemy still trespasses, whispering to souls, "You failed, you sinned, you belong to death." But the response from heaven remains unchanged. "The Lord rebuke you." These words are the seal upon every redeemed heart. They are the wall around every covenant soul. Even now, there are battles fought beyond sight, contests over destinies, over purposes, over promises. Yet the same authority that spoke over Moses speaks still. The Archangel's decree was not just for one man, but for all who belong to the same covenant. You do not stand alone. You are defended in realms you cannot perceive. The unseen war for Moses is the unseen war for every chosen one. Lucifer sought to claim what he did not own, as he always has. He stands at the borders of human failure, demanding rights that were forfeited by rebellion long before time began. But the blood of the covenant denies his claim. Heaven does not argue. Heaven decrees. The power of that decree is eternal because it originates from the unchanging will of God. This is the mystery hidden in the story. The Lord not only buries his servants, he defends their legacy. For the enemy would twist memory into corruption, but God guards even what is gone. He hides the sacred until the appointed hour. Moses was not forgotten in death, for he was preserved for transfiguration. What the adversary sought to defile became a vessel of future revelation. So it is with every soul that yields to God. What seems buried is not lost. What seems finished is being kept for resurrection. The same pattern repeats in every life redeemed by grace. Heaven guards what hell desires. The Lord hides what he will later reveal in glory. The enemy may accuse, but the answer remains the same. The rebuke of the Lord silences all claim. To understand this is to see the heart of divine warfare. The battle is not about destruction, but about identity. Lucifer's desire has never been annihilation, it is misappropriation. He does not seek to erase what God created, he seeks to corrupt it, to claim what bears the image of the Creator. That is why accusation is his weapon. It is his way of saying, "You are mine." Yet every time he speaks, heaven responds with the same verdict, "The Lord rebuke you." That decree is the eternal boundary line he cannot cross. And so, even in your silence, even in your sleep, even when you are unaware, the same defense surrounds you. The story of Moses' body teaches this, that God defends his own without asking for their permission or their awareness. He defends because he has chosen. He protects because he has claimed. When he says, "Mine," the matter is settled. That is the authority that silenced the prince of darkness in the valley, and that same authority speaks now over the souls of the faithful. The enemy may persist, the accusations may rise, but the verdict stands eternal. The Lord rebuke you. This is not merely a phrase, it is a seal, a command, a fortress. It is the word that defines the boundary between light and darkness, between life and death, between what belongs to God and what does not. The valley of Moab was the stage for that truth. Every heart redeemed since then is its continuation. But the God who buried Moses still buries the accusations of hell beneath the same decree, unbroken, unchanging, everlasting. The question that burned within my spirit was not why Michael fought, but why heaven sent him at all. For nothing in the divine order moves without purpose. The eternal does not act from impulse, and every manifestation of his power reveals a pattern. I understood then that the appearance of Michael was not merely to rebuke the adversary, but to declare the nature of divine protection itself. Heaven intervenes only when what is hidden bears eternal consequence. Moses was not defended because he was perfect, but because he was chosen. He was not guarded for his past deeds, but for what his body still represented, a living covenant that could not be corrupted by death. That was the mystery that opened before me, the realization that what God claims he continues to protect, even beyond the grave. I felt the vast intelligence of divine law unfolding like a scroll within my mind, and every word shimmered with authority. Covenant, glory, prophecy, these three form the axis of God's work among men, and Moses' body carried all three. The covenant is the declaration that God binds himself to his creation. It is not a contract made by equals, but a promise descending from sovereignty to frailty. In that covenant, the human becomes the vessel of divine intent, and that intent becomes indestructible. Lucifer understood this, which is why he sought to violate it through defilement. For if he could stain the vessel, he could mock the promise. Yet the covenant is not sustained by the vessel, but by the voice that spoke it. Even broken tablets do not erase the law written upon them. Even dead prophets do not silence the words they carried. The covenant remains because it is rooted in the will of the eternal, and his will is unchangeable. Glory, the second truth, is the visible trace of that will upon the material world. When Moses descended from Sinai, his face shone with uncreated light, for he had stood in the radiance of the presence. That light was not mere reflection, it was the residue of communion. The glory of God does not fade with death, for it is not born of flesh but of spirit. To Lucifer, that radiance was unbearable. He who once carried light as his garment could no longer bear its purity. The sight of divine fire resting on human clay mocked his rebellion. He sought to corrupt what he could not recreate, to drag the sacred into desecration, to prove that even what God touches can be spoiled. But the glory sealed within Moses' body was beyond corruption, for it was not dependent on matter, but on the word that sanctified it. Glory that comes from God cannot be diminished. It can only be veiled. Prophecy, the third pillar, completes the mystery. Prophecy is the thread that binds time to eternity. It is the echo of God's foreknowledge manifesting within history. Moses' life and death both pointed forward to the coming of the Christ, the mediator of a greater covenant, the embodiment of perfect glory. Centuries later, when Moses appeared beside Elijah on the Mount of Transfiguration, his body shone once more, untouched by decay, radiant in the presence of the Redeemer. The prophecy was fulfilled. What Lucifer had sought to defile became the very witness of Christ's victory. Thus, the preservation of Moses' body was not an isolated miracle. It was a link in the chain of divine continuity. Through that act, heaven declared that prophecy cannot be corrupted because it belongs to the one who transcends time. The adversary understood none of this. He saw only flesh, not fulfillment. He saw death and believed it was the end. But death is never the end for what has been claimed by the eternal. In that moment of revelation, I perceived a deeper law, the law of divine possession. What God claims cannot revert to corruption. His claim is absolute, not symbolic. Lucifer's rebellion began because he sought ownership. He wished to possess glory, to claim authority as his own. But Michael stood as the eternal contradiction, the guardian of divine ownership. The Lord rebuke you was more than rejection, it was the reassertion of that ownership. It declared that no fallen power could trespass upon what God had sealed. I saw then that this same law extends into every soul. For every believer is a vessel of covenant, a bearer of glory, a participant in prophecy. The enemy still seeks to claim what is not his, whispering that sin, failure, and mortality revoke divine ownership. But they do not. What has been purchased by the blood cannot be repossessed by darkness. Just as Michael stood over Moses, so heaven still stands over every soul sealed in covenant. The rebuke remains eternal. The Lord rebuke you. That is the line no evil can cross. It is not a prayer. It is a verdict. The words themselves are a fortress, and within that fortress abides every redeemed life. I understood then that Moses' burial was a parable written into creation. God hides what he has sanctified, not to conceal it from love, but to protect it from corruption. He hides his treasures in silence until the appointed moment of revelation. What is buried in faith will one day shine in glory. The valley of Moab was not only a grave, it was a promise in stone. The prophet slept beneath the earth, yet his story continued to shape the heavens. For in the eternal pattern, every act of concealment is preparation for resurrection. The burial of Moses was the prophecy of Christ's tomb, and Michael's defense was the shadow of the empty grave to come. The same authority that sealed Moses' body would one day roll away the stone from another mountain. When I perceived this, a trembling passed through me, for I knew that the mystery of that ancient burial was not history alone. It was a revelation of how God guards every destiny until the hour of fulfillment. The enemy may seek to claim, but the decree of heaven is irrevocable. The Lord rebuke you. Those words, spoken once in a silent valley, still resound across eternity, guarding covenant, preserving glory, and ensuring that prophecy will always find its dawn. The story of Moses' body does not end in the valley of Moab. Its meaning stretches beyond death, beyond time, and into the heart of every soul that walks the path of faith. What happened between Michael and Lucifer was not merely an ancient confrontation. It was the revelation of how heaven still contends for the living. Every man and woman bears a reflection of that same struggle. The adversary still seeks to claim what belongs to God, not with fire or violence, but through accusation, fear, and deceit. He does not fight for bodies now. He fights for identities. He whispers that sin defines ownership, that failure erases purpose, that weakness disqualifies calling. These are the same lies he spoke before the body of Moses. He failed, he said. He disobeyed. Yet the answer remains unchanged across the ages. The Lord rebuke you. The divine verdict is final. The authority that silenced Lucifer still speaks over every redeemed soul. The war that began in heaven continues within the unseen chambers of the human spirit, but the victory remains the same. For the Lord defends not only his servants of old, but all who bear his covenant. The defense of Moses was a demonstration of eternal law, the law of divine possession. What belongs to God cannot be lost to death, and what he claims cannot be undone by sin. When I beheld this truth in vision, I felt how deeply it pierces the illusions of man. So many live, believing that God's favor rises and falls like the tide, as if grace were a fragile flame that failure could extinguish. But the burial of Moses shatters that lie. God himself descended to lay his servant in the earth, proving that divine relationship does not end with breath. Even in silence, even in dust, the covenant abides. Heaven does not abandon what it has chosen. The adversary continues to trespass, but he does so without authority. He can whisper, but he cannot own. He can accuse, but he cannot undo the seal. His power is deception, and his defeat is truth. The words, "The Lord rebuke you," are not merely a command, they are revelation. They reveal that ownership belongs to God alone, and that no creature of pride can claim what is bound to humility. Moses was defended because he had yielded. The same law governs every redeemed soul. To yield is to be guarded. To surrender is to be sealed. That is why the proud fall and the meek endure. Pride seeks to possess. Faith allows itself to be possessed. Lucifer still wages war against the surrendered, for their obedience is a mirror that reminds him of what he lost. The more the believer yields to God, the more untouchable he becomes, for his life is hidden within divine will. The enemy cannot grasp what he cannot find, and he cannot find what has been hidden in God. This is why the Lord hides his servants both in death and in life. He hides them beneath his covering until their purpose is complete. To be hidden by God is not punishment, it is preservation. Moses was hidden in a grave so that his destiny could unfold untouched. In the same way, many are hidden now, not forgotten, but protected. The concealment of the chosen is the womb of divine timing. When the appointed hour arrives, revelation comes forth. Just as Moses appeared again beside Christ in radiant light, what Lucifer sought to defile became transfigured glory. That is the eternal reversal of divine purpose. What the enemy touches, God transforms. What he intends for corruption, heaven redeems for revelation. The battle for Moses' body was therefore a prophetic image of redemption itself. The same authority that spoke over his dust now speaks over every soul sealed by faith. The Lord rebuke you. These words are a weapon and a promise. They are not to be spoken in fear, but in confidence. For the believer, they signify more than deliverance. They declare identity. They affirm that the redeemed belong not to accusation, but to authority, not to condemnation, but to covenant. The Lord rebuke you. This phrase divides heaven from hell, faith from fear, destiny from despair. It is the line no darkness can cross. I saw that every soul who walks in light carries within them the echo of this battle. Every temptation, every doubt, every whisper of unworthiness is but a shadow of Lucifer's old claim. You failed, he still says. You belong to death. But the Spirit answers in eternal rhythm, the Lord rebuke you. The cross itself is the visible form of that decree. Christ's death and resurrection were the final repetition of what Michael declared in the valley. The body of the Son was claimed by death, but death could not keep it. The grave was rebuked, and the seal was broken by divine authority. The same power that preserved Moses from corruption raised Christ from the dead, and through him, the same victory now surrounds every believer. This is why faith is not a fragile hope, but a decree written in eternity. It is not a wish. It is ownership acknowledged. The believer does not fight for victory. He stands within it. For when the Lord lays claim, the battle is already over. I perceive then that the lesson of Moses is not about burial or angels, but about assurance. It teaches that heaven fights for the unseen, that God guards his own, long before they understand how deeply they are loved. Moses was defended, though he could no longer speak. So too, heaven defends us when we can no longer pray, when we have no strength left to resist, when silence seems to win. The covenant does not depend on our voice, but on his. The Lord rebuke you. Those words are still being spoken in places we cannot hear. They are spoken over our fears, over our shame, over every memory the adversary tries to claim. The rebuke of the Lord is the final word of mercy, the sound that ends all accusation. It is the same voice that called Lazarus from the tomb, that rolled away the stone, that silenced the storm, that spoke light into the first dawn. It is the same voice that buried Moses, the same voice that now says, "This one is mine." And when that voice speaks, creation obeys, darkness flees, the claim of death dissolves. What God has sealed remains sealed forever. The valley has long since fallen silent, yet its echo remains in the spirit. The dust that once covered the prophet now whispers a truth beyond the grasp of time. I have seen how God hides his treasures, how he guards them even in death, and how he allows no darkness to lay claim upon what is his. The body of Moses was not a relic, it was a testimony. It declared that divine ownership is eternal, that the covenant does not dissolve with the flesh, and that glory, once imparted, cannot be undone by decay. This truth burns within me like a lamp in the night, steady and unwavering. For the battle between Michael and Lucifer was not about power, but about belonging. Heaven does not fight for victory, it fights for remembrance, that all creation may know who holds dominion. The Lord rebuke you. Those words still move like thunder across the unseen realms. They silence accusation, they bind deception, they guard the boundaries of the redeemed. I feel their rhythm even now, pulsing through the ages, a decree that never fades. The Lord rebuke you. It is the final word that ends all argument between light and shadow, and within that word lies rest. For the soul that belongs to God no longer fears corruption, no longer trembles before death. The grave has become a threshold, not an end. I understand now that Moses' story was written for all who walk in covenant. His hidden grave is the mirror of our hidden life, concealed within the will of the eternal until the hour of revelation. What is buried in obedience will rise in glory. What is surrendered to God will never be lost. The same hand that buried Moses now guards every soul, sealed by grace. In the silence of prayer, in the weariness of struggle, in the stillness between breaths, that unseen protection remains. Heaven still fights for what God has claimed. The Lord rebuke you. This is not only the language of angels, it is the heartbeat of divine mercy. It is the voice that speaks over the repentant, the broken, the forgotten, saying, "You are mine." When I behold this, my spirit trembles with peace. For I see that all creation is drawn into that same pattern: concealment, conflict, revelation, and rest. Moses was hidden, contended for, revealed in glory, and now rests beyond reach. So too will every soul who trusts in the same God. The dust may cover the body, but it cannot silence the covenant. The night may darken the path, but it cannot extinguish the light. For what the Lord has claimed, no power can steal, and what he has buried, he will one day raise. Thus the valley of Moab still speaks not with words, but with certainty. The battle is finished. The decree stands. The Lord rebuke you, and all that is sealed by that word shall remain forever in the hand of God.